You went blue? Why'd you do this?
This one?
Yeah.
So this is obviously City of Miami. So this is I actually changed the logo.
Okay.
So, like you, I'm a change agent.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so actually a guy from the community was like, hey, the logo's a little stale. And I was like, yeah, it kind of is.
What was it? I forget what it was.
So actually, if you look at it right there, that's the old logo.
Got it.
And this is the improved logo.
Yeah, you got a little.
You know what
more
I mean? Just sort of like bring it into the 21st century.
Yeah. Well, and that's what you do, man.
That's
like
it.
You're a 21st century guy. Like I look at you, I don't even know your age.
Yeah.
Right? I look at a guy like you, and I'm like, it's the guy 23, 43, 60. I don't know.
Thank you.
I just hope I look as good as you when I'm your age.
That's right.
Okay?
I hope so.
You're looking good, dude. You
Thanks,
got
man.
all this
Work out.
charisma.
You got to do it.
You got this. You're hip. You're cool.
Thank you.
And people, I think, don't associate that with politicians.
Yeah, it's definitely, I'm a bit of a unicorn, when it comes to that. I'm blessed because I'm the first mayor of Miami that was actually born in the city in the 125-year history, and I'm also the first son of a mayor. So I feel like I grew up.
People call you a son of a mayor.
Well, they did growing up. It was like the mayor's son, right? That was my identity.
Got it.
And I think what's special about it is you get a very unique vantage point growing up in terms of how the city develops and is developing, and the people of the city. And for example, I grew up playing basketball on all the city parks, right? Like I would go with my dad and we'd go to inner city parks and play ball. And that's unique, and I think being mayor now, I was elected by 85%.
I saw that, man. It's crazy.
Crazy, right? and re-elected by almost 80%. I think part of it is that I don't feel that there's a separation between me and my city. I feel like my soul is united with my cities because it's how I grew up.
Right. So you're not having to fabricate or make something up or create something.
Yeah, I'm not like polling or anything.
Right.
I'm just talking to people. And I feel like I'm quintessentially Miami because I was born and raised here. By the way, Miami's 70.
Your family's Cuban, right?
My family's Cuban. My dad came to this country at 12, my mom at 7. They were exiled from their country of birth, which was Cuba, obviously.
Were they successful there?
Well, what happened in Cuba, unfortunately, was there was a change in leadership, right? And a leader there tried to convince people, if you just give me all your property, give me all your money, give me all your businesses, don't worry, we'll make everybody equal.
Wow.
And he did. He made everybody
This
equally,
is Castro, right?
Yeah, everybody equally poor and equally miserable. And so my grandfather was a political prisoner. His brother died in a jail in Cuba, in one of Castro's jails. So we in Miami are very shaped by that, what I call the origin story. Our origin story, which is how we got here, basically. And so I think what happens is when we see the U.S. now, and a lot of cities, in my opinion, falling into a trap of thinking that taxing people more and growing government to solve every societal problem is the answer. We look at them and we're like, oh no, we're scared. Like, that's scary.
My experience with anybody that's been from a communist regime is you have more concern about it than Americans that have never been under that influence.
That's right.
Because of what you call the origin story.
Well, tell me about your origin story.
Yeah, so I was raised by a single mother, and my dad died when I was 10. They were Italians. They came here from Naples and Sicily, and ended up doing the same thing they were doing there. One of my grandfathers never had papers to live in the U.S.
Wow.
So he was always having to operate kind of in the
shadows.
Yeah. My dad died when he was only 52, so it left me in a bit of a vacuum with any kind of leadership.
I would imagine.
Yeah, I lost my older brother. You kind of remind me of my older brother. A lot of charisma, man. This guy, he's silver tongue, like very natural, just smooth as silk, man.
Well, thank you.
Ladies, man, all the women loved him.
I'm married, so.
I understand. You probably proud of that. That's probably, you still have
15 years, 17 years together. So.
Yeah, good for you. 20 years with my wife.
Even being called a ladies' man is dangerous. Because that could.
Yeah, I didn't say that as an insult.
No, I know. But you know how it is.
Okay, his poll ratings just went down.
The Cuban wife will come in here and grab me.
Yeah,
I'm just kidding.
Yeah, no, but I can tell you're a good father and a good husband. And
thank you so much.
You could still be,
Yeah.
You're blessed with good looks, and so that's going to bring its liabilities with it.
Exactly.
So let me ask you, how did the 15% that don't vote for you?
Yeah.
What is it they don't like?
So I'm going to tell you a funny story. The guy who runs the head of my security detail, once told me. He said, 85% is 100%. Because you're never going to get 100%, right? I mean, it's like impossible. There are people that will just wake up in the morning, and if you tell them that the sun is rising, they will tell you it's setting.
Right.
If you tell them the sky is blue, they'll tell you it's red. They're just, born contrarians, right?
Yeah.
They just whatever everybody's doing, I'm not doing it. And so, you know, it's kind of funny. He always reminds me that, listen, 80% is 100%, which I think is a good lesson, because what happens in politics is I think we all at some level want to please people. We want to make people happy, right? Our job is to make people happy, right? And to do things that make them feel happy about what we're doing for them, right? And I think what happens is you have to understand that there will always be a certain percentage of people that no matter what you do, no matter how hard you work, they just won't be happy. Right. And you have to accept that as a leader. You have to be able to understand that, you know, that's a part of the reality. And if your psychology can't accept that, then you may be in the wrong business. I don't know how you feel about it.
I've never had an 85% approval rating, even amongst my own family. So I never, because I'm very outspoken. You know, I don't have to be, I can't even imagine what it's like to be a politician.
No, you don't want to. No, I'm just kidding. Listen.
So let me ask you, what do you think's harder, CEO of a business or CEO of a city, an entire city?
I mean, with all due respect, I think CEO of a city. And I'll tell you why. I have 500,000 shareholders. I have a $1.5 billion company with 4,500 employees, 4 labor unions, and a lot of international issues that affect me. Right. If an election in Brazil goes the wrong way, I have an influx of people who want to come here. Right. So if a hurricane comes, I don't control that. Right. So there's so many factors, I think, for a political CEO that are just outside of your control. Right. And then, of course, everything you do is high profile, right? Everything you do is sort of in the open. And I think for a private sector CEO, there's more privacy, frankly.
I do whatever I want to do.
Yeah, and it's not a newspaper article.
You're scrutinized every move you make.
It's not a newspaper article. You know, maybe they might, you might do something that could generate some press, but otherwise, you know what I mean? It's not like everything that you do. Right. So, it's certainly high scrutiny environment. I'll tell you a funny story about this morning. I was in an event and somebody says, you deal with stress really well. And I said, I get my blood drawn every so often, right? And my doctor told me I have very low cortisol levels, which indicates, low stress. Yeah. And he said, it's really weird. You're a political figure, you're running a big city, how
you would assume that you're
you're always stressed out. Yeah. And I said, you know how hard it is for an alcoholic to get drunk? Wow. In other words, you know how hard is somebody who's constantly in stress to be stressed, because you either develop calluses and you develop sort of coping mechanisms, or you don't survive.
Do you think that you being raised here and being in this environment and seeing Miami, does that help you, just naturally be acclimated to the environment?
It does. I think also seeing my dad go through it in the ups and downs, right? There's a certain aspect to this that is superficial, in the sense that oftentimes when you leave office, same people that used to laugh at your jokes, pick up your calls, are no longer there. And so I've seen that intimately up close. I hope to think that I'm prepared for that moment whenever it comes. I think that's why it's important to focus on your family. I'm blessed because as a public official, I'm able to have a private sector life. So I'm a working attorney. I do, other activities. So it gives me some perspective, some context, and hopefully whenever this is done, right? I can do other fun things that I can get fulfillment out of.
You're going to be able to do anything you want to do. Well, so how many times can you be a mayor?
Mercifully, 2 times. Okay. And I just got reelected last November, so I have no more re-elections.
4 years, three and a half
people
years,
often ask me, they're like, it's 2 4-year terms, it's 8 years.
Got it.
And I'm year 5, which is like dog years, they're like each year is like 7 years, It's really the most rewarding experience of my life. It's incredibly exciting to be able to see your city, and I think it's also unique to my experience, because what's happening in Miami now, and I don't know how you feel about it, Grant, having come down to this community, it's just unbelievable. I mean, now we're in the midst of Basel. I don't know when this will air, but we're in the midst of Basel right now. The momentum of the city. We're #1 in the nation in tech job growth. We're #1 in the nation in wage growth. We were named the most important city in America by Forbes.
And that wasn't the case a decade ago.
By Financial Times. We're #1 in direct foreign investment in the U.S. So no, I mean, we've never been #1 in a lot of those, those KPIs.
Well, it's changed a lot, because I know that when I got here 11 years ago, we left LA before it was popular to leave. Yeah. Right. So we had been there 25 years. I tried to reach out to the mayor there and the governor. No response. Nobody will talk to me. I'm like, if you guys keep raising their taxes, I'm gonna sell everything.
Absolutely.
No response by the governor. I went on TV and said, look, I love where I'm living. Yeah. Our family's here. We're having a baby. We don't want to leave. Yeah. You're forcing me out of this place.
You don't know how many times I've heard that story.
And we, look, Miami was like, no way I'll ever move to anywhere in Florida, okay?
Yeah.
And then we looked at Austin, Texas. We looked at Nashville. We looked at Las Vegas, okay? And then I was on this
By far, you picked the best place.
I was on this trip. I was on a speaking gig to
Yeah.
to the Eden Rock Hotel.
Yeah.
Halfway from the airport, I flew in commercial, driving across the causeway. I called Elena and said, FaceTiming her, said, we're moving to Miami.
That's it.
Like I wasn't even here.
And what
10
year
minutes.
was this?
This was 2012.
Wow. Oh, that was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Started buying real estate here.
Brilliant. I mean, I was 2012. I was 3 years in as a councilman. Mm-hmm. In 2015, we had the highest growing year in our history, which was 13.1%. Last year, coming out of the pandemic, we're number one in pandemic recovery, 12% growth. So when you consider, and growth for us means it's a combo of property value appreciation and new construction, because our entire tax base is based on property, right? So it's your business, right?
Yeah, thank you.
So it's 12%.
I'm contributing my part.
Of course you are, and so it's 12%. I mean, it's unbelievable. And you know what I've done with that 12%? I've given the money back to the people. Yeah. I've reduced taxes to the lowest level in our history. We've never had a lower tax rate. I like to think of it as spiking the ball on people, places like New York and California that seem to not understand. The more you tax people, the more you disincentivize them to stay there. And frankly, they're not getting a great ROI, right? In the sense that it's not like there's no homeless or there's no crime. You know what I mean? If you say, okay, well, I'm paying 54 cents of the dollar.
Right, and I solved all the problems.
And everything it's like Shangri-La, you know what I mean? Like, this is like the perfect place, you know, fine, right? But that's not what's happening.
Right. So, you know, I guess this last election, what is that called? The midterms?
The midterms, yeah.
Midterms. So everybody's hoping for the red wave. I'm like, I hope that doesn't happen. I want that. I want just let that blue thing keep happening up there. Let it keep happening.
This is
they drive all this traffic down here.
Well, here's a funny story about that. When I started attracting people to Miami, everyone was worried about who I was attracting, right? Like, is this going to change our politics, if you will? And it's actually interesting that in New York, after the midterms, they were saying that all the New Yorkers that came here must have been Republican, because Miami, for the first time since 2016, well, in 2016 it went plus 30 for Democrats. In 2016,
here,
Dade County, right? This year it went plus 10 for Republicans. That's a 40% swing.
Wow, that's
so all
crazy.
the migration made us more red, more conservative. By contrast, Lee Zeldin in New York lost, right, to Catherine Hochul, and had all those New Yorkers stayed, maybe he would have won in New York. That's what they were saying.
Got it.
So it's actually interesting. It's kind of a counter thesis where people were thinking like, hey, be careful, Mayor, what you wish for, because you're bringing all these people here. You know, what are their politics going to be? And what it actually turned out was my thesis.
They're coming here for this.
Of course. My thesis was, listen, people are not taking makeshift watercrafts to Cuba. Right? They're not going back. Right? They're not, when you're leaving a place, you're not going to recreate the place where you're going to, right? You're going because you're fleeing. It's a trauma.
Yeah.
Right?
So they've been coming from New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Illinois. They've been coming
Chicago,
down here for the weather, right?
San Francisco, the sort of Silicon Valley, Los Angeles, et cetera.
They were coming for the weather for the last decade.
Yes.
Now they're coming for other reasons.
Yeah, now I think what's happening is it's you know, and you talk about 10x, right? And I love that phrase, because disruption has to be when there's a massive differential, right? And I think what's happening here is two disruptive events which create like a 10x sort of scenario. One of them is a quad generational thing, which is this transition from a highly industrial economy to a highly digital economy, right? That's sort of like when you change from the agricultural to the industrial, right? This is a 10x sort of event, right?
Right.
And then you have a generational, right? From the boomer generation transitioning to sort of our generation, right? So you see this happening at the same time. So that to me is what I call a tsunami of disruption, right? And it's a wave of opportunity. And cities that understand the wave, recognize the wave, and pull out their surfboards and ride the wave are going to do
You're
well.
talking digital. You're talking Web 3.0.
Yeah, and I'm talking about like just the opportunities, right? And the cities that tax people to death, don't treat their customers, you know, you treat your customers with respect, kindness, and appreciation. If you built your business, which you told us your origin story, when you're successful, the last thing you want to do is walk around your city and feel like a pariah.
Yeah,
that's feel like you're not wanted.
Yeah.
And you had situations where, you know, in New York, they won the HQ2 prize, and then New York says, no, thank you. You know, I mean, it's 50,000 high-paying jobs.
Right.
What's the signal effect of that? right? We don't want you. If you're successful, we don't want you.
Yeah.
And in San Fran,
and you're inviting Elon here.
Right.
You're saying, hey, bring Twitter to town.
Whereas in San Fran, they said F Elon Musk, and he wrote back, message received, and took off to Austin at the time, which at the time, Austin, frankly, was better positioned than Miami. But I think if that tweet would have happened today, I think he'd be here.
Yeah.
So, you know, we're still
Well, you got people coming in.
On
Citadel came in.
Yeah.
That's going to be great.
Ken, like you, very similar story in the sense that he said, you know, he was I met him in Chicago. And
Ken brought more with him than I did, though.
Well, everything is it's at some scale, right?
Yeah.
But he, he loved the city, right?
Yeah.
And he gave a lot to the city, contributed a tremendous amount to the city, and he just felt like, you know, the leaders were just not being responsive and were not taking care of what they needed to take care of. And I think he felt sort of obligated, unfortunately. And I think he really wanted to do it in a sense, because I think he felt a sense of obligation, and he really, really went all in to try to help solve the problem.
And I think he warned them enough times that, hey,
absolutely,
fix this.
No
so what do you do after this? What do you do after your, you know, I know the most popular man in politics said that, or he thinks he's the most popular man, said you're the second most popular man.
Well, actually, it's a funny story. I was at a wedding with the person we were talking about. And
we're talking about Trump.
Yeah, and I ran into him. One of my friends, it was my friend's wedding. And he said, you're the only politician in America that's harder than I am, is what he told me. Which I thought was hilarious.
Yeah.
And I thought that was funny. But, he's obviously, charming, I am thinking about the future.
Yeah.
I cared tremendously about this country.
Right.
I think our city is the most dynamic city in the country.
I could see you as a president. Could you guys see this guy as a president? I could absolutely, 100%.
Thank you. I think this is the most dynamic city in the country. I think we've created something special. And we've done it by following 3 simple rules. We keep taxes low, we keep people safe, and we lean into innovation. That's it. That's all we do. And I think that is a really good model for this country. If we keep taxes low, if we give people back more of their money, balance our budget, if we keep people safe, if in American cities people can feel safe, so they don't have to worry about something as basic as safety, and if we can focus on high-paying jobs and creating prosperity for people, that is a recipe for success. That's a formula for success. We've done it.
You think that can be done across the country, not just the city?
I know it can be done. I know it can be done. But it requires leadership. Sometimes it requires tough decisions.
Yeah.
Sometimes it
requires...
And
how do you do that? Like, how do you tell the people the truth? Can a politician tell the people the truth anymore?
Yeah, it's funny you say that. There's a good... I'm a movie guy. I like movies. I like to quote movie scenes. There's a movie called Primary Colors. I don't know if you ever saw it.
Primary Color. I think I saw it.
It's your homework. But anyways,
okay.
So it was John Travolta, who plays Bill Clinton's character in
I saw Primary
1992
Colors,
election.
Yeah.
And he's talking to a labor union. He says, I'm going to do something really outrageous. I'm going to tell you the truth. Right? So I do believe that it's one thing for me. Obviously, I'm a chief marketer for my city because that's my job. But we have KPIs to prove it.
Right.
Being number 1 in the nation in wage growth, having a 1.4% unemployment, having 640 homeless, being number 1 in direct foreign investment, number 1 in tech job growth, number 1 in tech job migration, being ranked the happiest city in America, the healthiest city in America. That's all real.
He's got his pitch down.
Yeah, that's all real. I didn't make these things up.
You don't have.
I have sites for all this.
I think that's what makes it easy for you. It's like it's the truth.
It's the truth.
It's like people say, "How do you always come up with something to say?" I'm like, I'm just telling people the truth about what I'm doing. Like,
you can hate on me, you can hate on what I say, you can have a counterpoint or counter argument, and that's fine.
What doesn't change?
It doesn't change that. Look, I'll give you a counterpoint that people always throw in my face. Well, rents are up a lot. And I say, yeah, they are. You know what I mean? I don't hide from it. Rents are up across America because we have historic inflation, right? Because governments have been spending way too much money. So the problem, I'm the president of all the mayors in the country, the president of the U.S. Conference of Mayors. So we have the same problem in Austin, same problem in Denver, same problem in Washington and in New York, whatever. So
until you go to Singapore and then you see how high they can go, or you go to Sydney, Australia, and you're like, oh, they're another 80% higher.
And that's the thing. It's hard to contextualize it because everyone is focused on their particular ecosystem, and I get it. Right, and we're doing everything we can to do public-private partnerships to increase affordable housing, and you do a tremendous amount of philanthropy with at-risk youth. We're all trying to do the best we can, but government can't solve every problem. And by the way, oftentimes government is creating the problem.
Yeah. So I love that, and I totally agree with it. How does local business people in any community, whether it's Miami or Austin, how does a guy like me help contribute to whatever movement the mayor's trying to make there, Democrat or Republican?
Well, I think the first thing is, I've learned this, by the way, through this process, because this all started for me, like this hyper growth, this 10x growth started for me on December 4th of 2020. I know the day. Right, and the day was.
So we're in COVID.
We're almost in 2 years from now, right? In a few days it'll be. In 3 days it'll be two years from that day. And somebody put out a tweet that said, "Hey, what if we move Silicon Valley to Miami?" And I responded very innocently, "How can I help?"
Wow.
That's it. And it was a counter narrative when you saw what was happening in the other cities, and it was like, "Wow, this is a public official that wants to create prosperity."
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That doesn't just think government has to solve all the problems. That we can actually help people, empower people, right? So I think I learned from that moment that I'm now a storyteller. And as I weave the narrative of my city, I have to help, tell the stories of the Grant Cardones, how you came here, why you came here, how you've succeeded, and use my portal to do that. So I became a podcaster, essentially, right? Like I've done 300 something podcasts.
That's amazing. And is anybody doing that? Is anybody using that platform?
I don't know anybody that's doing that.
Right.
You know what I mean? As a public official.
Right.
So, but I think it's important, because what happens in these four, whatever, this is kind of like a rectangular office, but what happens in this office, people should know. It's also a transparency thing.
Right.
Like if I would have met with you and I would have thought you and your wife are phenomenal people, nobody would have known. It would have been like, oh, great, Maybe they would have checked the logs and they would have seen that you came.
Right.
But now they're seeing.
This is being documented.
It's theirs. It's not just us.
Right.
It's also for them.
Right.
Right. So I think it's special. So I think that's number one. I think number two, obviously, the fact that you have, you did, this is really important what you said. You said you looked at Austin, Nashville. You looked at you did your due diligence, as a good investor should.
That's right.
Right? Because you're investing your most precious asset, which is your time, and where you want to live in your family, live in your, So the fact that you did that analysis with your success and your track record, and you can look in that camera and say, I picked Miami.
I picked Miami.
You know what I mean? That is really, really significant.
I mean, we came here with 3 employees, okay? We have almost 1,000 employees, 280 here in town, we're expanding into Scottsdale, Arizona. Like, I wish there was a little less regulation where I live. I don't know what it's like down here. I kind of regret not being down here.
Yeah, well, you can.
Down here, I got to move everything. I have to move everything.
It's okay.
Huh?
It's all right. It's all good.
You'd help me do
that?
Yeah,
of course. No, and I know where he lives. He lives in a city that's slightly outside of my boundaries, but
yeah.
So
how does a guy, like, how do we help Miami grow even faster and better?
Well, I think employing people, growing your business, telling the story. You're giving back a lot. You contribute a lot, and I think that's important because, again, the public sector can't do it all. But when you're doing the financial literacy training for young adults, that's huge. I have a program where we give every single kindergartner a savings account in our public school system.
Wow.
Right? And it's very similar to your program, right? Yeah. What we do is we give them and their parents.
What does it mean, a savings account?
So we put $50 in a savings account that they can't withdraw from.
How many kids is this?
It's every single kindergartner in the city of Miami.
Wow.
Every single one.
How many is that?
I don't even know.
Thousands?
Yeah, I have no idea. It's probably hundreds, right? If not thousands.
Okay.
So every single kindergartner gets either $50 or $25, depending on whether they're in free and reduced lunch or not, right? If they're wealthier or not. And then what we do is we do a financial literacy training for them and their parents. All the way through. They can never take the money out until they're 18 years old.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Right, so it grows
beautiful
with interest, right? And they can put money in, but they can't take money out.
Right. Love it. So it's an illiquid account.
Yeah, exactly.
No touch this. Touch the capital.
The point is that all of the studies show what you've, I'm sure, learned, which is that if you teach people financial literacy, they're going to have better outcomes later in life. Right? They're going to understand how to manage money. They're going to understand how to save money. They're going to understand how to invest money. So they're going to understand things like interest and return on investment and stuff like that.
Yeah, they have a real experience with money, not just some theoretical.
Yeah, and it's
so the reason I asked how many was I was going to try to figure out how to match whatever.
Oh, well, let's do it.
So if somebody on your staff can tell me how many, then we'll just figure out how to give them another 50.
There you go.
So
I love that.
They start
Done.
with 100.
See, that's one way you can do that.
Right.
Yeah. And I think that's it empowers people. You know what I mean? We're trying to empower people. Let me tell you something. I told this to somebody yesterday. I've been in public service for 13 years. I spent 11 of those 13 years, with the exception of these last 2 years, because I just showed you that window, trying to help on the expense side of the equation, right? Which meaning affordable housing, low-cost transportation, et cetera, et cetera. That's important. I'm not saying it's not important, but for the last 2 years, I focused on the income side, right? Oh, that offends some people, by the way.
Yeah.
It offends some people that I focus on trying to empower people as opposed to just giving them a fish and saying, hey, here's a fish, just be happy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? As opposed to saying, hey, here's how to fish.
Right.
So you don't need me to give you a fish.
Right.
So you can get your own fish.
Right.
And it's
So when you switched from the expenses to the income, what happened for the city?
well, we were #1 in wage growth.
Yeah.
In the country.
Yeah.
#1 in income growth.
This is what I tell people, man. Business owners, like, focus on your income. Your income is your offense. The expenses are the defense.
Absolutely. And look, let's contextualize it. We're in a high inflationary market, right? So, yeah, even though we're #1 in wage growth, inflation is reducing purchasing power significantly, right? So there's always that juxtaposition.
Are you hearing a lot of that? Are you getting a lot of flack about the inflation thing?
Well, we hear it a lot in the rental increase context.
So
right?
people are starting to ask for rent control, I guess.
Oh, they have. It's against the law in the state of Florida. It's not doable, but they certainly have asked for it. And I always tell them, I said, guys, be careful what you wish for. You know what I'm saying? Because let me tell you what happens. If you can't, and you see this in rent-controlled markets, right? If you can't recapitalize a building 30 years from now, it becomes a slum.
Right, exactly.
Right? And if you have rent controls, a bank may not lend, so you're not going to get a new product. Right, so what happens is you it feels good. I understand.
Yeah, it sounds
good. It feels good to do it because you don't want to, as a public official.
Seems just and fair.
You're like, oh, this is the right thing to do.
Right.
But in the end, it ends up working counter to your objective, which is to create more affordable housing. So we do it as a carrot approach as opposed to the stick approach. We give people incentives. We get a leverage rate of somewhere between $15 and $20 to our $1. And what we get in return is a percentage of area median income, income restricted rents, and obviously a limit on what you can increase them over time, and an affordability period. So you don't have to do it. I'm going to give you money, or I'll give you land and money to build a project. You build it at your risk. You get a developer fee, right? And you have to keep the rents at a certain level. If you don't want to do it, it's all good.
And that includes where? Dade?
No, so that's the city of Miami, but Dade has similar programs as well. Yeah.
Okay.
So Dade, just to give a context, is about a 2.8 million area. We're about 600,000, give or take, but we balloon up to about 1.5 million because our whole daytime, everybody works in downtown, so our daytime population grows significantly.
DeSantis and Trump, they're kind of in the same lane.
Yeah.
How would your lane be different if you had one?
I think my lane is...
And we didn't, just so everybody knows, we didn't talk, we had no prep on this.
No.
He and I did not have a call.
No, not at all.
He didn't say, you can't ask me this, ask me that, like zero.
No, listen,
we walked in a room, sat down, and started banging it out.
My lane is, I would describe it by saying two things. My lane is...
You agree with their lane being...
Yes,
I do.
I think that they're drafting each other, right? So my lane is, I was blessed to be elected by 85% and reelected by 80%.
Yeah.
And I'm the son of an engineer and the grandson of an engineer, right? So I like to solve problems.
Yeah.
Engineers solve problems. We don't try to blame somebody for the problem, or we don't try to solve it through a particular rubric. We just solve the problem. And as a mayor, I remember one time the mayor, I think it was a Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, a guy named Bill Peduto, who's no longer mayor, told me one day, Mr. Mayor, in America there's 3 parties. I said, really, Bill, what are they? He goes, there's Republicans. I go, yeah. He goes, there's Democrats. I go, yeah. And he goes, and there's mayors. And I think the mayoral approach is solve the problem.
Yeah.
Solve the problem. If there's a pothole, fill the pothole. If a street's broken, fix the street. If there's flooding, get the drainage system.
He's saying mayors are so close to the action.
Yes, and that we don't have the luxury sometimes.
Right.
Of getting into the partisan fight. And I'm a Republican, right? So, I believe.
Yeah, and I didn't know. I got to tell you, I didn't actually know whether you were Republican or Democrat.
I'm Republican.
Because you're just kind of
I'm Republican. I believe in limited government.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I believe in, all the things that the Republican principles are, but I also believe in solving problems. And I believe that people care more about an elected official that listens to them and solves their problem rather than how they do it, right? They just want to get it solved. And there's a lot of problems in this country, and I think we've got to take that kind of approach. And frankly, I think also, we live in a very diverse city. And I think our diversity is a strength. I don't see it as a weakness. I see it as a strength.
Oh, 100.
Right? So, 70% of the people that live in the city were not born in the city. I'm the exception, actually. I'm in the 30% because I was first mayor born in the city. But so that means that our city welcomes people. We're welcoming people. And I think treating people with dignity, with respect, being welcoming, they love that.
Right, right.
And we're not seeing that a lot in politics. We're seeing fighting, bickering, division, and that's just not my style. If that makes any sense.
So can a guy with your style though make it through?
We'll see. Well, I mean, look, who knows? I mean,
it's such a brutal sport.
Yeah, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm certainly, and I've talked about this publicly already. I've obviously been flattered by a lot of people talking about me in the national context. I do think that what we're doing here in Miami is special, and I do think that it can create prosperity for the country. I believe that. So whether I'm the right messenger to deliver that or not.
Well, you're going to influence the outcome in either way. So
we'll see.
You're in a good position to do that. So look, I appreciate everything you're doing in Miami.
Thank you, Grant.
You make our family feel safe here. We're going to go see Art Basel today. We just love the city. It's been great for us. Probably 200 of the employees that we have here they came from other parts of the country, from California to Indiana to New York. Just came down here and fell in love and started families here, and they're paying their bills and driving cars, and so appreciate everything you're doing for us.
Listen, and I'm proud of what you've built. Your story is a compelling story for people. Yeah. I was watching a video of you, and it reminded me of me, actually, because you were talking about you were in college or something, you got in a fight, and something happened to you, you got busted up. And
you got
right
100
stitches or something. And I think the lesson was, and I wanted to say this because I think it's important, because I don't think I was, I think I was a late bloomer. You know what I mean? I wasn't the guy that went to an Ivy League school. I didn't, I didn't have all these, I wasn't like perfect growing up. I was a kid that, was sort of a bit of a rebel. Yeah. And I think the message for people should be that you can be successful even though you haven't lived like this perfect cookie cutter life, and you haven't gone to the best school in the world, and and you could be very, very successful if you work hard, if you care, if you learn how to inspire people, and you certainly inspired a ton of people.
Yeah, thank you. Do you think America is an exclusive country for that kind of possibility?
No, I think America is inclusive of so many different stories, right? And I think that's what makes us beautiful. Right, like you don't have to follow a certain path. There's almost an unlimited amount of paths. But I think what happens is people sometimes feel down on themselves if they weren't great high school students, if they didn't get to the great Ivy League caliber school, and they think, well, maybe I can't achieve. And I think there's so many stories of success in this country, but we got to tell the stories.
Yeah, right? People need to hear it, because I know it inspires me. What you've done inspires me. Last thing, okay, I want to just ask about education because you just brought it up. Like, how do you see that changing here with the internet?
Yeah.
It's 12 years to go to schools. It's another 4 years to go to college. Yeah. It's like I can get information in an instant. Yeah. Like, how is that going to change going forward in the next 10 or 15 or 20 years?
Two things. One, I think education is the great democratizing opportunity. I think we all have a moral obligation. I say we as collective, as a community, and you do it, and I try to do it, to give our children, all of our children, the most premium education possible, and one that is married to the real opportunities. So there's a disconnect there, right?
100.
And I think number two is, I think we're going to enter into, to use your 10x sort of analogy.
Yeah, I like that.
We're going to we're going to enter into an incredibly disruptive moment in education.
Yes.
And I'll tell you why. I was recently at a conference where I stepped off a panel, and they gave me these goggles. I don't know if you've ever seen this in VR.
VR, yeah.
Right? And I put on these goggles, and I'm like transported to this unbelievable university. And I've seen universities in other parts of the world that are these, multi-billion-dollar institutions, on the capital side, right? And then you got to get the best teachers, which are expensive. And I realized that for $300, I can give a kid in my inner city these goggles, and they can go into this world. They can get taught by the same teacher that everybody else gets taught. And there's
no
a
books,
scale,
no tuition, no property. And see, to me, that's going to be deflationary.
Yeah, 100%.
Like I think personally, this inflation thing is is overblown. That we're already over that piece, and that we're actually going to see technology drop pricing across the board.
That could very well happen, and particularly on,
for those guys that embrace it, though.
It's a hopeful message, because if you are struggling as a person, instead of thinking let's figure out,
you got access to Harvard now.
Right, exactly. Instead of figuring out how can government solve this problem for me. No.
Right.
We're going to make sure the private sector gives you an opportunity, or even if it's partially the public sector, gives you an opportunity to get the premium education so that you yourself can succeed. That's number one. If something goes wrong, or if we need to help you and take care of you, whether it's medical treatment or whatever, sure, we'll be there for you. Yeah. But let's try to
give everybody a shot.
Sure.
Appreciate you.
Take care, brother.
Okay.
Thank you so much.